The space station, called Harmony's Edge, floated in the darkness between three different star systems. It was built exactly here for one reason. No single alien race could claim it as their territory. The massive metal structure spun slowly, creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings inside. Today, it hosted the most important meeting in 300 years. War was coming to the galaxy. Everyone knew it. The signs had been building for months. Trade routes were being blockaded. Military fleets were gathering at borders. Diplomatic messages were getting more and more hostile. If something did not change soon, half the known galaxy would burn. That was why 12 different alien species had sent their best representatives to Harmony's Edge. They came to talk, to negotiate, to find some way to avoid the bloodbath that seemed inevitable. But nobody really believed it would work. The hatred ran too deep. The conflicts were too old. The pride was too strong. The main conference room was huge and circular. It had to be. Some of the alien delegates were massive. Others needed special atmosphere mixes to breathe. A few could not even exist in the same gravity field as the others. The human engineers who built the station had done their best to make everyone comfortable. It was not easy. General Vexthor represented the Korthak Empire. He stood 7 feet tall, and his body was covered in natural armor plates that could stop laser fire. His claws were as long as human fingers and sharp enough to cut through starship hulls. His species had conquered 43 worlds through pure military might. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. When he was angry, which was most of the time, his scent glands released chemicals that made other species feel afraid. He had brought a squad of his best warriors to the station. They waited outside the conference room with weapons that could level city blocks. Commander Silthara spoke for the Zephyrian coalition. She looked almost human except for the thin tentacles that grew from her scalp instead of hair. These tentacles glowed when she used her telepathic powers. Her species could read thoughts, plant suggestions, and even drive enemies insane without touching them. She wore robes that seemed to shift color based on her mood. Right now, they were dark red, which meant she was preparing for battle. Her telepathic abilities were so strong that she needed no bodyguards. Her mind was weapon enough. The Vathari delegation was the strangest of all. They were not really alive in the way other species understood life. They were beings made of living crystal that could exist in the vacuum of space. Their representative was called a shard bearer, though humans could not pronounce its real name. It stood 8 feet tall, and its body was composed of thousands of sharp crystal fragments that moved like liquid. When it was agitated, it hummed at frequencies that could shatter glass. When it was truly angry, it could break apart matter at the molecular level just by thinking about it. The shard bearer needed no protection because it was protection. 9. Other species had sent their own representatives. Each brought their most dangerous warriors. The Nexari delegate was a being of pure energy that could travel through electrical systems and overload entire power grids. The Threx ambassador was a hive-mind creature that could split into dozens of smaller forms, each one armed with natural weapons. The Valdris representative secreted acids that could dissolve most known materials. The conference room looked like a gathering of monsters. Claws, fangs, energy fields, and toxic gases filled the air. The smell was terrible. The sound was worse. Every species seemed to be trying to intimidate all the others just by existing. And then there was Dr. Linda Murphy. She sat in a simple chair near the back of the human delegation. She wore plain civilian clothes, a gray jacket, and black pants that would not look out of place in any human office building. Her thick-rimmed glasses kept sliding down her nose, and she pushed them back up every few minutes. She carried a tablet computer and a small bag that probably contained nothing more dangerous than snacks and spare batteries. She was 53 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed maybe 130 pounds. Her hair was starting to turn gray, and she had laugh lines around her eyes. Nobody paid attention to her. Ambassador Peter Collins led the human delegation. He was a professional diplomat who had spent 20 years negotiating trade agreements and border disputes. He sat at the main table with the other senior representatives. Behind him sat 3 human military advisors in their dress uniforms. They looked serious and competent, but nobody was particularly worried about them either. Humans were known to be decent fighters, but they were not in the same league as the Korthak or the Vathari. Linda sat apart from the main group. She had a notebook in addition to her tablet, and she wrote in it with an old-fashioned pen. Sometimes, she would look up and watch one of the alien delegates for a few seconds, then write something down. She never spoke unless someone asked her a direct question. When she did speak, her voice was quiet and polite. She sounded like a librarian or a teacher, not like someone who belonged in a room full of the galaxy's most dangerous beings. Sael. First day of negotiations went badly. General Vexthor accused the Zephyrian coalition of using mind control to steal Korthak military secrets. Commander Silthara claimed that the Korthak Empire had been planning to invade neutral worlds for months. The Vathari Shardbearer announced that both sides were being illogical and that the crystal beings would solve the problem by destroying all biological life in the disputed sectors. Each accusation led to counter-accusations. Voices were raised. Weapons were almost drawn. At one point, General Vexthor stood up so fast that his chair shattered under the force. His scent glands released anger pheromones so strong that 3 smaller species had to leave the room to avoid passing out. Through it all, Linda kept taking notes. She watched how Vexthor's neck muscles tensed when he was about to lie. She noticed that Silthara's tentacles twitched in specific patterns when she was preparing to use her telepathic powers. She observed that the Shardbearer's crystal fragments moved faster when it was calculating something complex. She made notes about breathing, patterns, and chemical emissions. She recorded which species reacted to which types of stress. She paid attention to body language and vocal inflections. She was studying them all like a scientist studying lab animals, and none of them noticed. The second day was worse than the first. The third day was worse than the second. By the fourth day, several delegates were openly talking about leaving the station and preparing their fleets for war. The galaxy was running out of time. That was when General Vexthor finally lost his temper completely. General Vexthor slammed his massive fist on the conference table. The metal surface cracked under the impact. His scent glands were working overtime now, filling the air with chemicals that made everyone else in the room feel like prey animals facing a predator. His claws extended fully, each one gleaming like a sword blade in the artificial lighting. "This is pointless," he roared in his grinding metal voice. "You Zephyrians think your mind tricks make you superior. You sit there in your fancy robes and pretend to be civilized while you steal thoughts from honest warriors. Well, I have had enough of your lies and your manipulation." Commander Silthara's tentacles were glowing bright red now. They moved like angry snakes around her head. Her robes had turned almost black, which meant she was preparing for serious mental combat. "How dare you accuse us of dishonesty, you primitive brute? Your species solves every problem with violence because you lack the intelligence for anything else. Perhaps it is time someone taught you the meaning of respect." The Vathari Shardbearer began to hum. It was a low sound at first, barely audible, but it grew stronger by the second. The crystal fragments that made up its body started moving faster, creating a hypnotic, swirling pattern. "Both biological species demonstrate severe logical flaws," it announced in its strange, harmonic voice. Perhaps elimination of emotional responses would improve negotiation efficiency. The other delegates began choosing sides or preparing to defend themselves. The Nexari representative flickered between solid and energy form, ready to escape through the electrical systems if things got violent. The Threx ambassador was already splitting into smaller copies of itself. The air in the room crackled with tension and barely controlled power. Ambassador Collins tried to restore order. "Please, everyone remain calm. We came here to talk, not to fight. Violence will solve nothing. We need to find a peaceful solution to our differences." But his words were lost in the rising chaos. General Vexthor stepped away from the table and turned to face Commander Silthara directly. His breathing was getting faster and harder. His whole body was tensing up like a spring ready to release. "I challenge you to single combat," he declared. "Let us settle this the honest way, with strength and skill instead of sneaky mind games." Silthara stood up as well. Her tentacles were writhing now, and sparks of telepathic energy were dancing between them. "You want to test your pathetic physical form against the power of a superior mind. Very well, primitive. I will show you what real power looks like." The two most dangerous beings in the room faced each other across 10 feet of empty space. Everyone else began backing toward the exits. Even the other warriors and fighters knew that when a Korthak general and a Zephyrian mind controller decided to battle, smart people got out of the way fast. That was when Linda Murphy cleared her throat. It was not a loud sound. In fact, it was barely audible over the humming of the shard-bearer and the angry growling of General Vexthor. But somehow it cut through all the noise and made everyone pause for just a moment. "General," Linda said in her quiet librarian voice, "before you proceed, you might want to know that your adrenal equivalent glands are producing stress hormones at levels that indicate you are experiencing what humans call a panic attack." The room went completely silent. Every eye turned to look at the small human woman with the thick glasses and the notebook. General Vexthor froze in place, his massive form suddenly as still as a statue. Linda pushed her glasses up her nose and continued in the same calm tone she might use to discuss the weather. "Your species has fascinating combat protocols, actually. The chemical cocktail you are releasing right now is designed to enhance your warrior capabilities by increasing strength, speed, and aggression. But it has an interesting side effect that most Korthak do not know about, because they usually do not survive long enough to experience it." She flipped through a few pages in her notebook as if looking for specific information. "When these stress hormones are sustained at current levels for more than 6 minutes, they cause temporary paralysis of your voluntary nervous system. The involuntary systems keep working so you will not die, but you will not be able to move either." General Vexthor tried to speak, but found that his voice was getting weaker. His left arm began to twitch uncontrollably. "You have been in this heightened state for approximately 5 minutes and 30 seconds, Linda observed, checking her watch. "So you have about 90 seconds left before the paralysis sets in. I thought you should know." Commander Silthara stared at the human woman, with a mixture of shock and suspicion. How could you possibly know that much about Korthak biology? That information is not available to outside species. Linda looked up from her notes with the patient expression of a teacher explaining something obvious to a slow student. "The same way I know that your species' telepathic abilities are completely neutralized by specific pheromones that my colleagues and I have been releasing into the air circulation system for the past hour." She reached into her small bag and pulled out what looked like a simple electronic device, no bigger than a television remote control. "We have been studying your biological responses and psychological patterns for decades. All of your species, actually. It is remarkable how much you can learn about someone when you really pay attention." Silthara's tentacles suddenly stopped, glowing. The telepathic energy that had been building around her head flickered and died like a candle being blown out. She tried to reach into the general's mind to read his thoughts or plant suggestions, but found nothing but silence where her powers should be. "You are blocking my telepathic abilities," she said, and for the first time her voice carried a note of fear. "Not blocking," Linda corrected politely. "Neutralizing. Your telepathic organs work by detecting and manipulating specific neurochemical signatures in other species' brains. The compounds we have been introducing to the air supply interfere with that process. It is completely harmless and temporary, but quite effective. The Vothari shardbearer stopped humming and turned its attention fully to the human woman. "You dare to use chemical weapons against the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council?" Linda shook her head like someone correcting a simple mistake. "I am not using weapons against anyone. I am simply demonstrating why this war you are all so eager to fight would be a terrible mistake for everyone involved." She stood up slowly, and for the first time since the negotiations began, every being in the room was focused completely on her. The small, quiet human woman with the gray hair and the friendly smile had somehow become the center of everyone's attention. "You see, while you have all been perfecting your weapons and training your warriors and building your fleets, we humans have been doing what we do best," Linda continued. "We have been learning about you, about your weaknesses, about your fears, about your biology and your psychology and your cultures." She walked to the center of the room, her soft footsteps the only sound in the deadly silence. "About how to kill you." Linda walked to the center of the conference room with slow, careful steps. Her shoes made soft, clicking sounds on the metal floor. Everyone watched her move. The massive General Vexthor was now completely unable to speak or move, though his eyes still tracked her movements. Commander Silthara stood frozen in place, her telepathic powers gone, her tentacles hanging limp around her head like dead snakes. Linda reached into her bag again and pulled out a small device that looked like a tablet computer. She pressed a few buttons, and a holographic display appeared above the conference table. It showed a detailed three-dimensional image of Korthak internal anatomy, with various organs highlighted in different colors. "The Korthak Empire," Linda began, speaking in the same quiet voice she had used throughout the negotiations. "Your entire species has what humans would call a design flaw in your respiratory system. You evolved on a world with very specific atmospheric conditions. Your lungs can process the air on most habitable planets, but they cannot handle certain types of microscopic organisms." She pressed another button and the hologram zoomed in on the lung structure. Red dots appeared throughout the breathing passages. Common Earth bacteria, the kind that live in our soil and water, would cause complete system failure in your species within 6 to 8 hours. The bacteria would multiply in your lung tissue faster than your immune system could fight them off. Death would be certain and extremely unpleasant. General Vexthor's eyes widened with horror, but he could not move or speak to protest. "We have already synthesized large quantities of these bacteria," Linda continued matter-of-factly. "They are stored in climate-controlled facilities on 12 different human worlds. We could deploy them as an aerosol weapon using standard atmospheric processors. One cargo ship could sterilize an entire Korthak colony world in less than a day." She changed the holographic display to show Zephyrian brain anatomy. The image was beautiful and complex, with delicate structures that looked like flowering plants made of neural tissue. "The Zephyrian Coalition prides itself on mental superiority," Linda said, now looking directly at Commander Silthara. "Your telepathic abilities come from specialized organs that are essentially modified brain tissue. These organs are incredibly sophisticated, but also incredibly fragile. They operate by detecting and manipulating electromagnetic fields generated by other species' nervous systems. The hologram showed electromagnetic wave patterns flowing around the brain structures. Expose these organs to specific electromagnetic frequencies at the right amplitude and duration, and the telepathic tissue experiences what humans call cascade failure. The damage spreads throughout the organ system within minutes. Your entire species would become not just telepathically blind, but completely catatonic." Silthara tried to back away, but found that her legs would not obey her commands. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "We have mounted electromagnetic pulse generators on our deep space cargo vessels," Linda explained. "They look like normal shipping containers from the outside. A single ship could disable the telepathic abilities of every Zephyrian in a star system. Multiple ships working together could affect entire sectors of space." The holographic display changed again, this time showing the crystalline structure of Vothari physiology. The image looked like a complex geometric sculpture made of living diamond. The Vothari believe their crystalline forms make them essentially invulnerable to conventional weapons, Linda said, addressing the shard-bearer directly. And you are correct to a point. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, even nuclear explosives have little effect on your molecular structure. But crystals, no matter how exotic, all have one fundamental weakness. The hologram began to vibrate, showing wave patterns moving through the crystal matrix. Resonance frequencies. Every crystalline structure has a specific frequency that will cause it to vibrate until it destroys itself. We have identified the exact frequency that affects Vothari physiology. A simple sonic pulse at the right wavelength would cause your entire species to shatter like wine glasses hit by an opera singer. The shard-bearer's humming had stopped completely. Its crystal fragments were now moving very slowly, almost sluggishly, as if the being was in shock. Linda continued moving through the holographic displays, showing detailed biological and psychological profiles for each species represented in the room. The Nexari delegate learned that their energy forms could be trapped and dispersed using modified electromagnetic nets. The Threx ambassador discovered that their hive mind connections could be severed with targeted neurological disruptors, leaving them as helpless individual fragments. She showed the Valdris representative how their acid-producing organs could be neutralized with simple chemical compounds that would turn their own defensive secretions against them. She explained to the Corellian delegate how their silicon-based metabolism could be poisoned with common industrial chemicals. She described to the Benthari ambassador how their photosynthetic skin could be killed by exposure to specific wavelengths of light. Each revelation was delivered in the same calm, professional tone. Linda spoke like a doctor explaining treatment options to patients, not like someone describing methods of genocide. The fascinating thing about all of these approaches, Linda said as she scrolled through more files on her device, is that they represent only the most basic and obvious solutions to the problem of defending humanity against potential threats. These are the methods we developed in our first few years of studying each species. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each delegate in turn. Some tried to look away but found themselves unable to break contact with her steady gaze. What should really concern you is that these are not our best ideas. These are just the options we do not mind you knowing about, because we have developed dozens of more effective approaches that we have not mentioned yet. Linda pulled up another file on her tablet. The holographic display now showed what appeared to be a complex flowchart with hundreds of interconnected nodes and pathways. Shall I tell you about the psychological warfare protocols we have developed? Based on detailed studies of your species' social structures and cultural values. Or perhaps you would like to hear about the economic weapons we could deploy that are designed around your trade dependencies and resource needs. We could destroy your civilizations without killing a single individual, simply by manipulating your societies from within. The silence in the room was so complete that everyone could hear the soft humming of the station's life support systems. Several of the smaller delegates were visibly shaking. Even the most powerful warriors looked stunned by the scope of human preparation. Or maybe you want to know about the cultural viruses, Linda continued. Ideas and concepts designed to spread through your communication networks and gradually change how your people think and behave. We could turn your own citizens against your governments, your children against your traditions, your soldiers against your leaders. She closed the tablet and put it back in her bag, then looked around the room one more time. Still think this war is a good idea. The Nexari delegate flickered between solid form and pure energy several times before finally managing to speak. Its voice sounded like electricity crackling through broken wires. You are lying! No single species could develop so many different methods of destruction. It would take centuries of research and billions of credits in funding. Linda adjusted her glasses and smiled. It was the first time she had smiled during the entire conference. The expression was not comforting. It was the kind of smile a teacher might give to a student who had just asked a very foolish question. "Oh dear," she said gently. "You still do not understand what humans are, do you? Let me explain something about my species that might help. Clarify the situation." She walked back to her chair but did not sit down. Instead, she stood behind it with her hands resting on the back, like someone giving a lecture to a classroom full of students. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We know this. We are not the fastest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. We are certainly not the most peaceful or the most civilized. But we do have one characteristic that makes us unique among all the species we have encountered. Linda paused and looked around the room again. General Vexthor was still paralyzed, but his eyes were focused on her with desperate intensity. Commander Silthara had managed to sit down, but her hands were shaking. The other delegates were listening with the kind of attention usually reserved. "For death sentences, we are persistence predators," Linda continued. "Do you know what that means? Most predator species in the galaxy are ambush hunters or pack hunters or power hunters. They rely on speed or strength or surprise to catch their prey quickly. But humans evolve differently. We are endurance hunters. We do not kill our prey in a single dramatic attack. We follow it. We track it. We study it. We learn everything about it, and then we pursue it until it collapses from exhaustion." She began walking slowly around the conference table, moving past each delegate as she spoke. This hunting strategy shaped everything about human psychology and culture. We do not give up. We do not stop learning. We do not stop preparing. Even when there is no immediate threat, we are always planning for the next one. Linda stopped next to the Threx ambassador, who had pulled all of its split forms back into a single body and was trying to make itself as small as possible. "Your species has been part of the Galactic Council for 87 years. In that time, we have had 3 minor trade disputes and 1 diplomatic incident involving fishing rights in a neutral system. Not exactly a hostile relationship." She moved on to the Corellian delegate. "Your people have been consistently friendly to humans. We have mutual defense treaties and profitable trade agreements. Your scientists have collaborated with ours on dozens of peaceful research projects." Linda continued around the table, stopping briefly next to each delegate. "Peaceful neighbors, friendly trading partners, allies in some cases, and yet we have detailed plans for how to exterminate every single one of your species." The Valdris representative, whose acidic secretions had been slowly eating holes in his chair, finally found his voice. "But why would you prepare to destroy allies and trading partners? It makes no logical sense." Linda returned to her position behind her chair. "Because that is what humans do. We prepare for everything. We have detailed emergency plans for asteroid impacts, solar flares, rogue black holes, time travelers, robot uprisings, zombie plagues, alien invasions from other galaxies, and at least 1,000 other scenarios that will probably never happen." She gestured toward Ambassador Collins, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and horror. "Our own ambassador here carries authorization codes that would allow him to order the complete evacuation of Earth if necessary. We have backup colonies, backup governments, backup everything. We even have plans for what to do if Earth itself becomes sentient and decides it does not like us anymore." Linda pulled her tablet out again and scrolled through several files. Preparing for the possibility that our galactic neighbors might someday become our enemies was just Tuesday morning's work for our strategic planning departments. "We have whole government agencies whose only job is to think of new ways the universe might try to kill us and figure out how to survive it." The Benthari ambassador, whose plant-like skin had turned a sickly yellow color, spoke in a whisper. "Your species lives in constant fear." "Not fear," Linda corrected. "Preparation. There is a difference. Fear makes you hide and hope nothing bad happens. Preparation makes you ready for anything that might happen. We learned this lesson very early in our development." She activated her tablet again, and a new holographic display appeared. This one showed a blue and green planet that everyone recognized as Earth. Our homeworld tried to kill us for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plague diseases, predator animals, poisonous plants, extreme weather, earthquakes, tsunamis, droughts, floods. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, usually at the same time. The hologram showed various disasters striking the planet throughout its history. Most species evolve on worlds that are relatively stable and safe. You develop intelligence and technology and then spread to other worlds. But humans had to become intelligent just to survive on our own planet. We had to learn to adapt to anything, to prepare for everything, to never stop thinking about what might go wrong next. Linda closed the tablet and put it away. This is why we study you so carefully. This is why we develop contingency plans for every possible threat. It is not because we want to hurt you. It is because we cannot turn off the part of our brains that is always asking, what if this goes wrong? And how do we survive if this happens? She sat down in her chair for the first time since the confrontation began. The really important thing about having the capability to destroy your enemies is not using it. It is making sure they know you have it, so they never force you to find out if it actually works. Ambassador Collins finally found his voice. Linda, please tell me we are not actually planning to commit genocide against our allies. Dr. Linda Murphy looked at her colleague with the patient expression of someone explaining something very simple to someone very slow. Peter, we are not planning to commit genocide against anyone. We are planning for the possibility that someone might force us to defend ourselves. There is a very important difference. She gathered her papers and organized them neatly in her bag. Besides, they are not our enemies. They are our neighbors. And good neighbors respect each other's property lines. The conference room stayed silent for a very long time after Linda finished speaking. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the soft humming of the station's life support systems and the quiet breathing of those delegates who actually needed to breathe. General Vexthor was the first to recover from the paralysis that Linda had predicted. His massive body began to move again, slowly at first, then with increasing control. He flexed his claws and rolled his shoulders, testing each muscle group to make sure everything was working properly. When he was satisfied that he could move, normally again, he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He walked over to where Linda was sitting and knelt down on one knee in front of her chair. Dr. Murphy, he said in his grinding metal voice, I have fought in over 100 battles across 43 worlds. I have killed enemies with my bare claws and watched entire armies flee before me, but I have never been more afraid than I was today in this room. Linda looked down at the massive warrior kneeling before her. Good, she said simply. Fear keeps people alive, and staying alive keeps civilizations alive. General Vexthor stood up slowly. The Korthak Empire will sign whatever peace agreement you wish us to sign. Commander Silthara's telepathic abilities had returned as the human pheromones gradually cleared from the station's air system. Her tentacles were glowing again, but the light was dim and weak. She approached Linda's chair with careful, respectful steps. Dr. Murphy, she said, may I ask you something? Of course. Did humanity really develop all those weapons and strategies you described today? Linda looked up from organizing her papers. Commander, humanity has been preparing for potential threats since we first learned to make fire in caves. We prepare for asteroid impacts that might not happen for 10,000 years. We prepare for solar flares that occur maybe once in a century. We prepare for alien invasions, robot uprisings, zombie outbreaks, and about 1,500 other scenarios that will probably never occur in our lifetimes. She closed her notebook and put it in her bag. Developing contingency plans for defending ourselves against each member species of the Galactic Council was just routine work for our strategic planning departments. They probably finished it over lunch on a Tuesday afternoon. The Zephyrian commander processed this information carefully. Your species lives in a constant state of readiness for war. Our species lives in a constant state of readiness for survival, Linda corrected. War is just one option among many. We actually prefer peace. It is much more efficient and much less expensive. The Vothari shard-bearer approached slowly, its crystal fragments moving in careful, controlled patterns. Dr. Murphy, if your species has such powerful capabilities, why do you not simply conquer the galaxy and rule over all other species? Linda removed her glasses and cleaned them on her shirt before answering. Because we do not want to rule the galaxy. Ruling things is hard work and mostly boring. We prefer to be left alone to do our own research and build our own societies. But we also want to make sure that if someone tries to hurt us, they understand exactly what the consequences would be. She replaced her glasses and looked around the room one more time. Think of it this way. If you know that your neighbor has a very large, very mean dog that he keeps in his backyard, are you more likely or less likely to try to steal things from his house? The shard-bearer's humming took on a different tone, one that indicated understanding. The threat of retaliation prevents the need for actual retaliation. Exactly, Linda said. We show you our teeth so we do not have to bite anyone. Over the next several hours, the peace negotiations proceeded with remarkable speed and cooperation. Territorial disputes that had seemed impossible to resolve suddenly found reasonable solutions that satisfied everyone involved. Trade disagreements were settled with compromises that actually benefited all parties. Resource allocation problems were solved with creative sharing arrangements that nobody had thought of before. The Korthak Empire agreed to withdraw their battle. Fleets from disputed border systems in exchange for guaranteed trading rights in those same systems. The Zephyrian coalition accepted limits on their telepathic intelligence-gathering activities in return for access to advanced manufacturing technologies. The Vothari agreed to stop their expansion into biological species territory in exchange for exclusive mining rights in several asteroid fields. Each agreement was fair and reasonable. Each compromise gave something valuable to all sides. The solutions were so obvious and practical that everyone wondered why they had not thought of them months ago, before the crisis became so serious. But Linda knew why they had not found these solutions earlier. It was because they had all been too busy preparing for war to think seriously about peace. It was because each species had been so focused on their own advantages that they could not see the benefits of cooperation. It was because they had all been operating from positions of fear rather than positions of strength. Fear made people stupid. Confidence made them smart. By the end of the day, every species represented at Harmony's Edge had signed comprehensive peace agreements that would prevent war for at least the next 50 years. The treaties included detailed trade arrangements, territorial boundaries, resource-sharing protocols, and conflict resolution procedures. There were even plans for joint scientific research projects and cultural exchange programs. Ambassador Collins approached Linda as the other delegates prepared to return to their ships. Linda, I have to ask you something, and I need you to give me an honest answer. What do you want to know? Are we really capable of doing all those things you described today? Could we actually exterminate entire species if we had to? Linda gathered her things and stood up from her chair. She looked very tired, as if the day's events had drained all her energy. Peter, the most important thing about being able to destroy your enemies is never having to find out if you actually can do it. She walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back at him. But yes, we could do it. We could do it easily. And that is exactly why we will never have to. As the various alien delegations departed Harmony's Edge over the next day, each carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They were not the weakest species to be protected or the strongest species to be feared. They were the most quietly dangerous species to be very, very careful around. The deadliest person in the room had not been a warrior after all. It had been a middle-aged woman with thick glasses and a notebook full of very dangerous knowledge. The Peace would last for generations. Dr. Linda Murphy would make sure of that.